So, hi, Sara. Welcome to Industry Insights with G2. This right here is a segment where we try and get insights from some of the leading industry leaders like yourself. And we will talk about some of the trending topics that our audience, which is primarily marketers, can benefit from. And today I'm here to talk to you about unconventional B2B marketing, your journey, and your take on some of the trending questions.
Invitation.
All right. Jumping straight on to my first question. Of course, congratulations for being Switzerland's top LinkedIn influencer. How does your personal branding experience has influenced your approach to in-house B2B marketing leader?
I have definitely to find a bit my bias towards LinkedIn because it works obviously so well for me. So I think there is always the tendency to use it as the silver bullet. I think on the other hand, it's pretty clear that for B2B companies, especially I work now at a service provider for innovation and growth, corporate growth. So there is definitely a big overlap. It's a very relevant channel. I think it has influenced me because I saw the power of pushing out content that the audience likes and that resonate consistently, what it can lead to. And so yeah, I think I try to pass on this mindset within the company. I think what's a bit different when you are an in-house person versus creator, thought leader yourself is that in B2B, obviously there's a gap between the content that somebody else has produced and the knowledge that the expert has. So the real struggle is bringing those two parties together where marketing isn't able to create the content with the knowledge of the experts flowing in.
Yeah, and as of your LinkedIn, that looks great. Your content looks great. So I think that's a win-win for you. Now, coming on to my next question, I want to know your perspective on the role of personal branding for marketing leaders, especially now when LinkedIn is so popular among the B2B audience. How has your own personal brand influenced your company's marketing success?
So my company, as I said before, doesn't sell to marketers. So obviously, I think as a marketing leader, if we would have a product or service for marketers, obviously it would be like a complete audience fit because I would then be the expert marketing to marketers, and this gap that I explained before would not exist. So in my case, my personal brand has, I would say, an indirect effect because obviously I was able to bring Striber, my current company, the brand in front of a larger audience. And for example, every time I joined podcasts or I just documented my role as a head of marketing, you could really see the impact it had on website traffic, LinkedIn page subscribers, and also some people that really decided to apply because they were like, wow, we saw that Sara is so enthusiastic about this company and role. And so there are definitely benefits. And another indirect benefit is obviously the entire knowledge that I was able to transfer to my team when it comes to personal branding and writing on LinkedIn. And some of them started, creating their own posts, being a bit more consistent. So that's obviously also very nice to see.
Yeah, but I also want to know, do you think that leaders today should have like a strong social media presence? Like, would that help their branding as well?
Well, I mean, it's a no-brainer question. Of course, it can help, but the question is more how, right? Because I don't think that everyone needs to be on social media. I don't think everyone needs to be famous. It's like not everyone needs to create content for the sake of content. I mean, up today, it's the easiest thing that you can do. Just whip up a post with ChatGPT. I think it's really like, hey, do you like it? Because obviously, as you can imagine, doing it for a week is a thing. Doing it like me 4.5 years in a row. It's also, I had to say no a lot to other stuff to make this happen, right? So you really need to have a drive for this. You need to have a passion for communicating. You need to have a passion also to get in touch with audiences and make yourself a little bit vulnerable. That doesn't mean that you're gonna get hate or whatever, but obviously every time you launch a message in the public, you need to be very aware of how and when and what you communicate.
Yeah. Now I was scrolling through your website and I came across a line where you described yourself as a T-shaped marketer. That's very intriguing. Can you talk about that a little bit? And how does this approach enable more creative or unconventional B2B marketing strategies compared to earlier traditional roles?
That question comes really at a perfect timing because I just collaborated with a brand I'm working with on a study about full stack marketer, and so I think especially with AI, this role is super important. So I mean, in the end, it's the same thing. I called it T-shaped marketer, full stack marketer. It's this idea that basically a marketer has a very broad understanding of all the marketing disciplines, but is very specialized in one of the many marketing formats, channels, disciplines. And for me, this one is obviously content, but I have worn a lot of hats in my career, from, paid distribution to strategy to content to events. So I think my biggest skill is really being able to understand immediately when there is a business strategy, how I can translate it into marketing, and also where and how, and directly think about all the channels that make this marketing strategy happen. And I think more than ever, this is super important, because if all your marketing activities are not connected, apart from the fact that it's so much more time consuming, to make this happen, because you have basically to think about single initiatives from tip to toe, like separately, but it's also not efficient and effective for your strategy. So I really think this is kind of the skill that marketers need to master these days. Also because with all the AI tools that we have now, I think just like execution becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you've explained it pretty well in a nutshell. Now, when we think of B2B marketing, most of the marketers, primarily they focus on lead generation. So what's your philosophy on balancing short-term demand generation versus, long-term brand building in B2B especially?
So I think it's important to understand the role of marketing. And I think the role of marketing obviously depends on the company structure, business model. There are companies who have shorter sales cycles, maybe a few months, and there are companies who have longer sales cycles, for example, years, right? So the marketing strategy needs to marry this motion, right? So if you think that a company who has sales cycle of years just push out a post, a webinar, whatever, and generate leads and you got it, then it means you're already disconnected from reality of the business, and you will fail as a marketer, because you will not be, yes, maybe you will have a few leads. People will realize relatively soon that, it doesn't work. And so, you already lose. On the other hand, I think you also need to build the journey to the long-term results day after day, right? And I think if you are able as a marketing leader to explain exactly how the short-term tactics lead into the bigger picture, then you win. So it's more I think it's more a thing of setting expectations and being like, short-term, this is what you will see, long-term, this is what you will see. And I think it's also, and by the long term, we're talking about brand building, for example. And in that case, we know that it's a very abstract term. It's hard to measure, yada, yada. But we also know that brands that have a very strong reputation, like G2, we also know that once you have that reputation, the short-term tactics are more likely to succeed, right? And this is why I think you really need both, and you need to be very good at managing expectations. Because, for example, junior marketers, also myself when I was just getting started, and you have all those stakeholders coming with, hey, can we have this? Can we have this? Can we have? And you always want to say yes, because you also don't really know how to explain this balance, right? So I think it's very important to manage expectations right, and agendas.
Yeah, I think that's well explained. Now, I've definitely stalked you on LinkedIn. And in one of your LinkedIn posts, I saw you were addressing about declining LinkedIn reach. So what have you been observing, and how are you adjusting your strategy to the changing algorithm that we see every day?
Yeah, so first of all, quick backstory. I've been on LinkedIn for over 4 years now. So I have seen quite a few shifts in, formats that perform best, reach that goes up and down, summer slump. And I mean, now it's really like, I would say, a stable trajectory that the reach, it has been declining over the last 2 years. And I would say I made an experiment, I think about a year ago, that I repurposed one of my highest performing posts. It was kind of a visual with kind of a graphic of a marketing thing. And the same post got like 70% less impressions, right? And on the other hand, I would say the interaction, the engagement rate, obviously in proportion to the impression, was pretty stable, right? So this was already for me like an eye opener, kind of, okay, on one hand, the impressions are shrinking, but the engagement rate is relatively stable, which is honestly what really matters in my opinion. And basically, and this path has just continued over this year. And recently a study from a very, I would say, the biggest LinkedIn expert, who is Richard van der Bloem, came out. He does this LinkedIn report every year with really a ton of data. Like, I think, seriously, if you want to understand the algorithm, that's the thing you need to read every year, because he really analyzed a lot of posts and really gives insights about reach, about engagement, about formats, about employee advocacy, all of these things. And he confirms the same thing. So he confirms that the reach has gone down about 50% year over year, at least 90% of creators are seeing the same thing. So yeah, nobody's alone, I would say, but that the engagement is stable, and that definitely, if you are waking up today trying to build an audience on LinkedIn, is super way harder than, than when I started, for example. Personally, I think what a lot of people also say is that their inbound, their kind of the relationships that LinkedIn sparked are still there, right? So as long as they stand, and as long as you can just, keep creating quality content, obsessing less over the reach and the vanity metrics, and maybe using more the interaction side of LinkedIn, meaning maybe going to events as well, doing interviews, like we're building a relationship now, going on podcasts or organizing live events, or just simply, pinging people and say, hey, do you want to have a coffee chat or whatever? That's how you build the relationships. That's also how there is definitely a correlation between what happens in the DMs and comments and how much people see your posts. So I think it's much more important to think about the whole ecosystems and not just creating and posting, but also I think, it's not the moment to think about impressions as the golden metric.
Yeah, completely agreeing with you. Because I do think there's a lot of hype around algorithm changes and people really panicking about impressions and likes and the reach. But I think good content, like if you have good content, it will eventually fall in your way. Now, when we think of B2B marketing, the only platform that we can think of is LinkedIn. But beyond LinkedIn, which other platforms do you see are maybe undervalued for B2B marketing? And how should marketers adapt their approach towards these channels?
Well, I think no channel right now is completely underrated. I don't really feel there is like a LinkedIn 5 years ago where it was still like, just CVs. And then if you put a bit of different content, then you would boom. I think it's more about in an area where content is really super saturated with AI, how can you stand out, because obviously, I mean, there is more to marketing than content, but that's ultimately, the top of the funnel and how you get people in all the other tactics. And I think also as marketing as kind of fashion, in the sense trends always come back when something is too saturated. So for example, I think now online channels are very saturated. So people are really fed up. They don't want to be online more. They don't want to spend, hours on platforms and communities and whatnot. I mean, imagine I spend, I don't know, 8 hours at my laptop for work or more. And then I would rather kill myself than spend 2 hours communicating with people in an online community after I've done my job. It's very exhausting. So for example, offline communities are making a comeback, which were completely killed in the COVID times, right? So you see this pendulum. And another thing that I think is relatively trending right now is obviously Substack, which is a mix of a social platform, but also an email newsletter. And I think it's also quite simple, like it's not like, it doesn't have like a complex interface with 500 functions and whatever. So I think this is also very nice.
Yeah, regarding Substack, I agree with you because I think in the US it is really gaining popularity right now. In India, it's still, I think, underrated because not a lot of people know about it. But maybe after this article, people will. Now,
I
towards
should
that brings me
ask
towards
for
the
a commission from Substack at this point. It's not sponsored, by the way.
yeah, I will. Sure, I'll mention that in the article as well, in the brackets, not sponsored. Now, that brings me to my last question. What's a marketing rule in the B2B services space that you believe is outdated and it should be like it's ready to be broken and people should maybe like move ahead of it?
I think still a lot of people think that if you're, if you're selling to the C-suite or enterprise, you need to sound, robotic, button up to be taken seriously. I mean, C-level are always people, and yes, they also use LinkedIn and social media, read newsletter, they maybe laugh at memes, even if maybe they don't tell anyone. And also I think they want easy content that's easy to consume, even if it's business content. But obviously it's not that if you create, a 500 scroll length blog that's super technical, they will be like, oh, this company is serious, I'm going to do business with them. They're going to be checked out at the very beginning. And also I think whenever you ask a B2B company, because most of them, if not maybe from the get-go, they want to sell to enterprise, that's how it works. You ask them, who's your target audience? They will always be like, I don't know, CMO, CFO, CDAT, board member, And while I get it, where it comes from, a B2B company is not like a B2B decision maker is not one person. It's always like a committee, and, even a middle manager or even like somebody, I mean, I won't say necessarily the intern, but even somebody, I don't know, with 3 years of experience can be in charge of starting a purchasing decision. And so they might have, the power to influence the whole decision process. And if you just target decision makers with LinkedIn advertising, with your content, with whatever, you're completely, ignoring that part of the decision-making process, which can really, really make the difference.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Now, this brings me towards towards the end of this interview. But before we let you go, I just want to know from you, do you have any tip or any advice for the budding marketers out there who are just starting like the world in the marketing and they're trying to find their way? Anything like one tip or one advice that you have for them?
I think it's about just trying a lot of things as much as possible. And the beginning of the career, I think it's always that's really the focus. You shouldn't go after the logo, the pay, or all these things. I think it's really about find a company that, hires you and it's like, okay, now you do everything. You can do everything, just get it done, right? Because I think that's really how you grow super fast. And I think obviously also now with all those AI tools that we have, you can do a lot more even as a solo marketer. And I think you can experiment with most of them pretty much for free. And so, yeah, that's what I would advise.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great advice. I mean, experimentation is the key today. That actually brings us towards the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Sara, for doing this. I think we got some great insights today, and our audience will definitely have something or the other takeaway for them. So thank you so much again for doing this and taking out time to chat with us.
Thanks to you. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Sara. Thank you so much.